I'm sorry. Again, who just joined?
This is Carrie Rassman in Philadelphia.
Hi, Terry. Anyone else?
Yeah, hi. This is Todd Nedwick with the National Housing Trust.
Hi, Todd. Great.
Hey, Cindy. It's Jim Dodd from Community Care Pittsburgh.
Hi, Jim.
Hey, Cindy. It's Jeff from PA Silk.
Hi, Jeff. And anyone else? All right. We've got Aaron. We've got Todd. I'm actually going to flip the order, if you guys don't mind, because we'll start with the energy efficiency, the Clean Power Plan, and then we can do federal budget, state budget in that order. So I am very pleased to have Todd Nedwick from the National Housing Trust, who contacted us recently about an opportunity for the housing world to promote some energy efficiency measures in the new Clean Power Plan that's being developed. And I will turn it over to to Todd. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
And let you tell us what all that means.
Sure, absolutely. Good morning, everyone. My name is Todd Nedwick. I'm Housing and Energy Efficiency Policy Director at the National Housing Trust. And in my role at the Trust, one of the projects I'm working on is Energy Efficiency for All, which is a campaign to increase resources dedicated to energy retrofitting existing affordable multifamily housing. And we're doing that in partnership with about 36 state and regional and national organizations across the country. So the Clean Power Plan is a new federal requirement on states to reduce the amount of carbon pollution that is emitted from power plants. It's pretty central to Obama's climate change agenda. You might be wondering, what does power plants have to do with affordable housing? But we do think that there's an opportunity to secure new, and I underscore new, resources for energy retrofitting affordable multifamily housing. And the main opportunity is that states have significant flexibility in determining how they're going to reduce carbon emissions and comply with the requirement. And one option is to reduce carbon emissions from the existing building stock by investing in energy efficiency, lowering energy use with efficiency improvements. Reduces the need for energy generation, which obviously in turn lowers carbon emissions. So the state can prioritize investments in energy efficiency and affordable housing as part of their compliance approach. And in Pennsylvania, we are interested in trying to really get the message to the Department of Environmental Protection, which is the agency responsible for developing Pennsylvania's compliance plan, really educate them about the value of energy efficiency and affordable multifamily housing, and hopefully make sure that it's a priority in the state compliance plan. So that's sort of a very basic overview. I don't know if what else might be useful.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the process for the plan and how people can get involved, the webinar coming up?
Sure, yeah. So there are a group of organizations hosting a webinar tomorrow, the Trust, the National Housing Conference, and a couple of others. So that's an opportunity. It's sort of a overview of what the Clean Power Plan means for affordable housing, and what are some specific, policies or programs that might come out of it that would support energy efficiency investments in affordable multifamily housing. So that's tomorrow, and I want, Joyce, I think you were going to send the link out to register. If that's possible, that would be great. But in terms of the work that needs to be done in Pennsylvania, right now the Department of Environmental Protection is already soliciting feedback from stakeholders on what folks think the DEP should include in their state plan. The Department of Environmental Protection has until September 2016 to submit to EPA kind of an initial plan, sort of describing what approach they're going to take for implementing this. So, September feels like a long while off, but there's this pretty significant process that the agency needs to go through. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for stakeholders to provide input. So right now, in fact, the DEP is having some listening sessions. I think there may be a few left. There were, I think, 12 or so total. So if there are more listening sessions happening throughout the state, that's an opportunity to submit, to really just provide some comments on why multifamily affordable housing energy efficiency is a good thing and should be included. There's also a comment period open right now, and so the DEP is accepting comments until November 13th, and so we think it's a great opportunity if we can kind of mobilize affordable housing stakeholders to weigh in. Then that would really get the attention of the Department of Environmental Protection, who I think it's fair to say that the environmental agency is not going to think about affordable housing and energy efficiency investments in affordable housing without the necessary education that needs to be done. So that's an opportunity to do that. And then also, if there's the potential to meet and talk directly with the leadership at the Department of Environmental Protection, I think that would also be a really good opportunity to kind of educate and engage them about this issue.
Thanks. And I will add from the state perspective that the Housing Alliance is working on this, and we really want partners. It shouldn't be, we don't want it to be just comments from the Housing Alliance. We want to be working with people around the state. So if you're interested, let me know. There, as Todd said, the DEP is hosting listening sessions. There are about a half dozen still to come. Lehigh County, Schuylkill County, Erie, Clarion, Clearfield, and Lycoming County. So I can send you information. There is information available on DEP's website, a lot of good information. But if you want a link, just let me know. By the way, my email is Cindy, CINDY, at housingalliancepa.org. We will be preparing comments to submit November 12th. And DEP has said that the comments they want initially are on what should go into the plan, and they have posted a bunch of questions in particular that they are focusing, that they would like answers to. Then they will put out a draft plan sometime in the spring, again, for comment. But we think that the November 12th deadline is really significant in terms of getting ideas in there for programs and making sure that affordable housing and low-income communities are on the radar screen. And in fact, low-income communities reminds me, Todd, can you speak a little bit about the, Clean Energy Incentive Program? Do you?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the EPA has announced this program, which essentially is a way to reward states for incorporating specific strategies for delivering energy efficiency in low-income communities. It basically allows states that employ energy efficiency in low-income communities, they get awarded kind of these extra credits that help them comply with their overall requirement. So it gets them closer to the requirement that they need to meet. So this is a new proposal that was announced in August and is going to be up for comment. One outstanding issue is that EPA has not defined low-income community, and so they're going to be looking for feedback on what is an appropriate definition. And so I think that's a great opportunity for affordable housing community to get involved and make sure that the definition that they choose works well for the communities that you all work in. So that's another opportunity that we certainly would love to have some support on and to work with you all on providing feedback to EPA that's most useful for affordable housing in Pennsylvania.
Thanks. And I know that we have some folks from DCD, Department of Community and Economic Development, on the call, Lynette and others who work with the weatherization program. I'm pretty certain DCD must have a definition of low-income communities that they use for a variety of programs, and there's some other definitions probably floating around. So we'll definitely want to talk about that, make sure that we're coordinated.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
Lynette, I don't know if you have anything you want to add or if you're just listening at this point, but feel free to unmute with a *7 if you would like to.
Really don't have anything to add at this point, but I did find out from last week that our weatherization federal dollars cannot count towards this energy savings in the Clean Power Plan, but we'd still like to be able to think about ways that we can be a part of it, perhaps through multifamily or other means. In terms of the low-income definition, I'd be happy to try to pull together some information from this point. We really have used a variety of terms for low-income neighborhoods or low-income community populations. We've gone from neighborhood blocks to specified targeted areas, for example, in the NAP tax credit program. But there would be a variety of ways to look at it.
Okay, great. Well, definitely I would like to get together with you, and we'll think that through, and with PHFA, and see what's out there.
That would be great.
Todd, you also mentioned at the beginning, you said an opportunity for new resources. What resources are available?
Right. So, it can take different forms kind of early in the process to sort of, point to any sort of specific, source of new resources. But basically, a couple of examples, one approach Pennsylvania might take is to adopt a kind of a cap-and-trade system where carbon polluters are required to purchase allowances to emit carbon. That would generate revenue that the state would then use at its discretion, and they could choose to invest that revenue in energy efficiency and affordable multifamily housing. I don't know if folks are familiar with the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, RGGI, that many of the northeastern states are participating in, but that's a very similar model to that, and that, in those states there are specific funds that are going to affordable multifamily housing as part of that process. Another potential approach is, we know that in Pennsylvania utilities are currently required to provide energy efficiency programs under Act 129, but the programs that are available to affordable multifamily housing are pretty limited. So one option under the CPP would be for utilities to create more robust programs that will result in deeper, more comprehensive energy savings than what is currently being achieved. So that would be, again, new resources, higher levels of funding coming from the utilities into those programs for them to achieve the energy savings that they need.
Okay, so the resources would be essentially private sector, or considering, let's say, non-governmental,
right,
but possibly through programs created by the government to implement the plan to reduce emissions.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, all sounds good. Do people have questions for Todd? You can unmute your phone with a *7.
I'm sorry, this is Joyce from the Housing Alliance. I just wanted to, I missed the beginning. Todd, did you mention the webinar tomorrow?
I did, yes.
Okay, thanks, sorry.
And I know we have sent out information on it. I think just yesterday another email went out about the webinar, so check your emails. But also I know I have found it on the National Housing Conference website, nhc.org, and I'm sure that there are others, that you can find it elsewhere. So it's very good webinar. I think it was called Opportunities for, I think the first word was opportunities. It wasn't energy efficiency. I'm trying to remember so that people can find it in their web, in their inboxes. If you can't, let us know. All right, well, thank you very much. We'll certainly keep people apprised of what's going on, and hopefully a lot of you will be working with us to get something worthwhile done in Pennsylvania. I think we have a very receptive administration, a very environmentally friendly administration.
Right, absolutely. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you all about it. I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks. Aaron, would you like to tell us what's happening in Washington with the federal budget? Aaron Doller from the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities, a frequent guest on this call because he does such a great job. Only had good news.
Well, I'll have news, that's for sure. Can you all hear me? I got myself off mute successfully? Great.
You are unmuted.
Good. I will say a lot of what I'm going to say is pure speculation because the bottom line is we don't really know what's going to happen with the budget, especially given the shakeup in the House Speaker race. So let me go over where we have been, and then we'll do a lot of speculation about where things might be going. So, as you all know, the sequester level budget caps that have been limiting non-defense discretionary spending and therefore HUD spending have been in place this year and, well, not this year. For 2016, we've been writing bills this year for 2016, fiscal year 2016, which resulted in appropriations bills that had little growth for some programs and huge cuts for other programs. And, huge cuts, of course, in the home program, and then limiting the ability of Congress to fund some of the priorities, which would be increases for other programs like 25,000 units in the McKinney-Vento program to help end chronic homelessness, 67,000 vouchers to restore the vouchers that were lost to sequestration, and, other things like adequately funding admin fees for PHAs and, of course, capital funds for public housing and other items. So, few of those things got funded, and certainly and home and a few other places got pretty deeply cut. So we have been advocating for, and many on this call have helped with that, that Congress and the White House come to an agreement to lift these budget caps to help fund some of these priorities. At the beginning of October, and then in September, of course, the fiscal year 15 funding ended, and we went into fiscal year 2016, and Congress did just sort of put in place a stopgap measure rather than passing full new bills and called a continuing resolution. It just sort of kept the funding going from 2015 into fiscal 2016. That bill, that continuing resolution ends December 11th. So that's the next deadline, at least when it comes to government funding. So what has happened since they passed that continuing resolution? Talks started, it seems, in earnest, although they're keeping them very close to the chest, between the White House, McConnell in the Senate, Boehner in the House, and House and Senate Democrats as well, to try to come to an agreement to lift these budget caps. McConnell has said publicly, fully publicly, that he he hasn't so much said he supports lifting the budget caps, but says that it will happen. Now, that doesn't mean it actually will happen, but it seems that he at least is committed to these talks. Let's put it that way. And then John Boehner announced that he would be resigning from the post of the Speaker of the House, as well as from his position in Congress fully, and announced that his last day would be the last day of October, which means that then the House needs to, well, when that happened, that seemed to increase the possibility of a budget deal, given that Boehner no longer has anything to lose. Boehner seems to be for a budget deal, or at least not against it, but the large stumbling block is that there's a small but vocal faction in his party that would vote against any sort of budget deal. And so his ability to pass a budget deal through the House fully on Republican votes is pretty much zero. And so anything he wants to pass, he has to pass with some Democratic votes. Well, now that he's retiring, that political calculus doesn't matter so much. And so the possibility of passing something with Democratic votes goes up. Yet, the Republican caucus held an election just last week to choose their candidate for Speaker, and failed to do so because the sort of first in line, Kevin McCarthy, withdrew himself from the race the day of the election, and the party leadership didn't want to go forward, and it was unlikely that any one candidate that was currently in the race would be able to get the requisite votes to become Speaker anyway, so elections were postponed indefinitely. So that makes things sort of very up in the air in the House. Unfortunately, what all that means for the prospects of a budget deal is extremely, extremely unclear. There still isn't anything stopping John Boehner from passing a budget deal in the meantime, besides the fact that he might be too busy dealing with his caucus and trying to figure out who's going to succeed him, but there's nothing stopping him from doing it. So how this all plays out is really, really up in the air. We really don't know. As I said, the next deadline is December 11th, so we'll know something by then. But right now things are very unclear. It does seem that the talks are still going on, that the talks to lift the budget caps are still going on and still working on things. Proposals are still being floated. So it hasn't completely halted the process, but it really comes down to what Boehner can and will bring to the floor of the House. The other thing I want to mention is that obviously, so we would love there to be a budget deal that would result in probably what would end up being a large omnibus appropriations bill would be passed sometime around December 11th if they come to a budget agreement. So let's take that scenario for a second. Assuming they come to a budget agreement sometime, say, before Boehner leaves or maybe after, that resets the top-line spending that all discretionary programs can get, which means then the appropriations committees need to sort of redraw up their bills, hopefully with higher amounts. So if that were to happen, it would behoove us to again make the case, just sort of remind our members of Congress how important HUD programs are and that a large amount of this additional money should go to HUD and then go to the specific programs that we all care about, plug some of the holes that were shown in the budget, in the appropriations bills that were passed this year, prevent some of those big cuts and then fund the priorities like the ones I talked about earlier. So if that were to happen, it would sort of seem like we were back at the beginning of the year in funding wise. So I just wanted to flag that there will be, and then they'll sort of rewrite the bills and just like a normal appropriations process, just a lot faster. If not, though, if there is no agreement, it seems unlikely that we would pass the bills that were already written, although I guess that's possible. It seems more likely that we'd just end up with a longer-term continuing resolution, probably through the end of the year, a so-called full-year CR. If that were to happen, I think first of all, I think the most important thing is that would be very bad for a lot of different reasons. For a small reason, although this sounds bad, it's honestly not that huge, is that if you were just to carry forward 2015 funding into 2016, it actually ends up being slightly above the Budget Control Act cap. So you actually have to take a haircut off the top. So that doesn't allow really any wiggle room at all. And the problems that HUD faced at the beginning of this year that you might remember, everyone was talking about HUD is in a $3 billion hole between voucher renewals and renewing project-based Section 8 contracts on this new calendar year funding and receipts from the declining receipts from the mortgage insurance programs. If there's a CR, those things don't go away. Likely Congress plugs those holes, and where does that money come from? Well, it probably comes from the same place they got it from last year, which is still home or CDBG or somewhere else. So, at first glance, a CR might for someone looking at, home last year isn't at $66 million, so maybe a CR will be good for one of those programs. It seems unlikely that that's the case. I think a CR probably still looks pretty bad for HUD programs. So those are all the different scenarios. I know it's very complicated. The bottom line is we don't really know what's going to happen. We need to be ready for multiple scenarios, although the advocacy at the end of the day is the same, which is fund HUD programs at the highest levels possible.
Thanks, Aaron. And I think I'll just add to that, or maybe emphasize what you've already said, that the advocacy has to go on regardless of the maneuvering in Washington. But I see it as not so much a two-step, maybe a two-part message. One, we've been emphasizing lift caps. We can't do anything. We can't move forward. We can't help the people that we want to help, and that's the bottom line. With these very severe Budget Control Act caps in place. But lifting the caps doesn't guarantee that the money's going to go where we want it to go. And so it's very important to follow that message and fund the HUD programs, I would add, and USDA housing programs, and really talk about what those programs are doing in your community. I know folks on the call are very, very good at doing that, but just to emphasize, and it's my experience that often when you talk to legislators or their staff about budget items, especially smallish programs, things that they don't think about often, budgets are numbers on a page. Budgets are line items and numbers, and they have to make the numbers add up. And if they don't all add up, they look to see what numbers can they reduce. It's so important that they understand that to us these programs aren't numbers, that these are families in their communities, that these are the vacant properties, the communities themselves, they're homeless people, they're hard-working people who are struggling to make ends meet. So it's really important to get our stories across. But again, it's a two-part message. We've got to do away with the Budget Control Act caps because they're strangling us, and it takes away the discretion, the ability of the lawmakers to do what we sent them there to do, which is to figure out what to fund. But secondly, after they do that, we need to be strongly advocating for the programs that we work with. Aaron, schedule. So when are they in? When are they home?
Let's see. Yeah, so they're home this week, actually.
Okay. We.
And I'm not sure when the next recess is, but they'll be back next week.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
It's Joyce. Aaron, I'm sorry if I missed it. I'm kind of in and out. Did you mention the webinar on Monday?
No, not yet.
Okay.
That is definitely something we should mention.
Okay.
So on all of this, a coalition of national housing groups, housing and community development groups, is holding a webinar on Monday, the 19th at 3 p.m., sort of outlining what I just talked about, but we'll go into a good amount more detail on sort of where budget negotiations are, the spending caps, where some of the programs are, and also go into, there will be some talk of media work around the effort to lift the caps. So,
just a reminder to people to mute their phones.
That was me, sorry.
So that's at 3 p.m. I assume, Joyce, you have the link for registration?
She just muted. I think
We do. Yep. We can send it out to the people on the call,
okay,
and I think
great.
it's in our newsletter. So yes.
Yeah. So that'll be various. It's hosted by Enterprise Community Partners, and a couple different housing groups will be speaking. Someone from Doug Rice from the Center on Budget here, where I work, as well as CSH will be speaking as well. And Enterprise. So that, if you want to learn more, that would be a good thing to listen to.
All right. And questions for Aaron? Unmute with a *7. All right. I guess we are.
I have one other. Can I ask one other question? Aaron, I know you're going to discuss this on the call on Monday, but just wanted to put a plug in for part of your campaign over the next few weeks or through into November is to do op-eds, correct?
That's right.
And letters to the editor. So if there are people on the call, you'll be working, and we'll be working on a draft op-ed if people want to help with that. That's another thing that's in the mix.
That's right. So there will be one of the people from CSH's media shop will be talking about that, and there will be a link, as I understand it. I'm not making the slides, but as I understand, there will be a link sent out with a draft template for a sort of raise the caps op-ed that then you can tweak for your local area or local priorities, but that will be provided with the webinar on Monday.
Great, thank you. Anything else for Aaron? Okay, I guess we are all dumb. But thank you, Aaron. Great job as always. We'll be hearing from you. All right, turning to the state. Kristen, are you on the phone?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. So I guess what we had said is that I would give a brief update. You will talk a little bit about the impact on nonprofits around the state. We're talking about the state budget. There is no update. Well, I guess last week the House brought to the floor for a vote a revenue proposal, not a full budget, but just the idea of raising some taxes. It was soundly defeated, and now I guess they're talking again. I don't know. So we are, what is this? We are 3.5 months into the fiscal year without a budget, and that's starting to hurt. Huh, Kristen? I'm going to turn it over to you. Kristen is with United Way of Pennsylvania, and why don't you talk a little bit about the survey that you've done and what you've been learning?
Yes. So we actually are just getting ready to release the results of our second survey. We will be doing that tomorrow. So I won't go into a whole lot of detail about that today. I'm going to give you some of the themes that we saw, and if you'd like to see the hard data once that release comes out tomorrow, We're going to do the release at 11 o'clock in the morning, and after that it will be available on our website, which is www.uwp.org. So basically we had done a survey back in August, and we felt it was time to do an update as the end of September came. We were headed into October. When we did our first survey, there were a number of organizations who indicated that they were going to get along. They're going to be able to make it through August, September. When things came to October, things were going to get much more critical. So we wanted to get some hard information to be able to talk about that. We hear from a number of organizations who are feeling very discouraged. You're feeling very helpless. You're not necessarily willing to tell your story to the media, but you're probably talking to your legislators about how this is impacting you. And as you're talking to your legislators, telling your story, they're listening, but it doesn't seem to be resulting in any change to the course of action. So I know there's been some frustration, and our United Ways have committed to continuing to talk about the facts of the impacts of the impasse from our very nonpartisan view. And when we do the release on Thursday, our emphasis really will be on continuing to focus on the facts. We are not looking to point any fingers to the governor, to the legislature, to any particular party about the length of this impasse. Similarly, we are not weighing in on revenue sources. We are trying to just give a very impartial view of what's happening so that everyone who's in a policymaking position can be as grounded as possible in reality about what's happening as a result of this impasse and the need to get it resolved as quickly as possible. So when we did our second survey, there were a couple of themes that came out really strong. The first theme that we will talk about is job loss. We have some solid job loss numbers at this point. It's people who have been furloughed or laid off from full-time employment, from part-time employment. We've got some people who are working without pay. We've got a pretty significant number of people who have either had their hours cut back or have had their employee benefits cut back at some point. So we're going to put some hard numbers to that tomorrow. And we know that as many organizations as have had to make that decision already, there are roughly equally as many who are looking at having to make those same decisions in October, November, and December. So we will quantify that tomorrow. We're also going to talk about kind of the valiancy of everyone making do as best as possible. All of the nonprofit organizations, their staff, their boards of directors, it's very clear that everyone is trying their darndest to make sure they don't have to cut services, and there seems to be kind of this natural progression in the triage before people get to the point where they're cutting services. We did not have a significantly higher number of people tell us in this survey that they were cutting services than the first one, although we have asked the question a little differently this time. We quantified how many organizations have implemented waiting lists, and we also quantified how many organizations have curtailed services. And the triage process that I'm talking about is kind of common sense when I say it out loud, but we're just conveying to the legislators and to the governor that, initially everyone was looking at reducing non-essential purchasing, reducing travel, maybe not hiring to fill staff vacancies as they've occurred, or not expanding programs that you might have been planning to expand, that kind of thing. The next step is you dig into your reserves. You start to look at lines of credit if you're able to access them. And, of course, not everyone has a reserve, but that's kind of the next level, the contingency. And then based on how long your line of credit is going to last you, people then start looking at those decisions about furloughing staff or cutting back hours, cutting back staff costs in some manner. The final step then is curtailing services once you get to the point where you just can't make ends meet anymore. The survey definitely showed us that the progression gets very much steadily worse through the end of the year. We're going to share some snippets of information that we got. We're going to share it anonymously, but it's going to kind of paint the picture of what kinds of decisions organizations are facing now through the end of the calendar year. And we think that's going to help tell an important story. So as I mentioned, the overall message is these are the facts of the impacts of the impasse. We're talking about this on behalf of organizations who may not be able to talk about it publicly because they're concerned that, their clients, they don't want to cause their clients any unnecessary stress faced with the prospect that some of their services could be cut, and that's kind of a strategic decision from organization to organization. But we want to be able to tell this story as well as we possibly can with the data that we have available. We'll also have some figures about the increase in borrowing that has occurred since our first survey in August. There are more people borrowing. There's definitely more interest costs since our first survey. And we'll be able to put a very conservative number to the interest dollars that we believe people are incurring expenses for at this point in time. We're also going to point out, relevant to the previous conversation about the uncertainty that the federal budget casts over all of this and the extra level of torture that puts in terms of planning for the next few months. We know there are some organizations out there who have kind of been the beneficiary of just a lucky service mix where they may have some services they're providing which dollars are still flowing for because maybe they're Medicaid services, so they've been able to manage their cash flow issues a little bit better than people who are more exclusively reliant on state funding sources or state funding sources that flow through the counties. However, we know that if the federal government can't find a spending plan that will carry us forward from December, that casts another big question mark over everything. So we're going to make that point in our release. And right now, for the yesterday and today, I've been traveling around to the majority and minority leaders' offices and the governor to give them a pre-briefing on the data that we're going to release tomorrow. Everyone's very sobered by it. They definitely appreciate the opportunity to hear more about what's happening out there at a statewide level. We did have 282 organizations that responded to the second edition of our survey, and they were a nice cross-section of a lot of different service provider types. So it's a pretty broad picture, specifically most commonly of kind of like the health and human services sector. We did have a pretty good representation of housing and homelessness responses on this survey. I think that what I'm hearing is a degree of we get it. We know that it's really bad. I think the tone after last week's vote in the House may have softened just a little bit, but we also know that there has not been one big collective coming together of the governor and all of the legislative leaders since that vote occurred. What I'm hearing is there's smaller group meetings that are going on, like the Senate Republicans and the Senate Democrats are meeting together, and at some point there was a meeting where at least 3 of the 4 caucuses were together. I'm not clear whether the governor has been to any of these meetings to date. There's supposed to be another meeting today, which will involve all 4 caucuses, but it didn't seem to be clear whether the governor was going to be there. So there's still conversations going on. It's still not the pace or the urgency that I think that we would like to see. So we're hoping that the data, when we release it this time, will be used more as a rallying cry for everyone to come together and to figure this out as quickly as they possibly can.
Thank you, Kristen. I appreciate that and all the work you've been doing to collect the information. So I'm going to open the lines for questions and comments for Kristen, and also let's hear from you what your organization is experiencing. Remember, *7 to unmute. Anybody?
This is Jeff from Silk. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. What was the website again?
Yeah.
It's www.uwp, which is for United Way of Pennsylvania.
UWP.org.
.org.
And just a comment, we have been talking to Centers for Independent Living. We have 18 in Pennsylvania, and we do have a few that are doing the lines of credit. We do have a few of our state-funded SILs that are in that and are getting closer to having to make some of the decisions that you referenced on staffing cuts and things like that. We're hearing for folks that want to that do nursing home transition that the state's denying the portion for food. There's money that comes from aging for folks to get out of a nursing home for like it's an allotment for about a month basically for when they leave the nursing home and try to get in their own home. That's being denied. We're also hearing that folks are who need home modifications, things like ramps to stay in their home, those things are being delayed. They're told they'll get them for physical disabilities and also for folks with intellectual disabilities that need those. So that's what we're hearing at this point.
So, Jeff, it sounds like it's not so much that the organizations have made the decisions to cut services or delay services, but that they're just not getting the funding to do it. The state's putting things off.
Yeah, right now, I think some of the stuff with the some of our state-funded SILs, the smaller ones, yeah, they haven't denied services yet. I think if something doesn't happen in the next month or so, but yeah, not as much. It's not like 2009, which is both good and bad, because a lot of us were around then. And what we're hearing is there's not as much urgency from the legislators. So unfortunately, because of that. So, but I think somebody brought up the federal part. I mean, right now, the federal funding was good through October 1 up till October 1, but we have no state budget, so you can't draw down your federal allotments on any dollars at this point, or at least your matching dollars, whether it's Medicaid or other programs that get a federal match. So I think we're going to start seeing more impacts. Now, I did hear yesterday they're starting to delay travel, and they're also putting off different meetings that folks usually have with different stakeholder groups. So they're starting to slice and dice a little more, even where secretaries can't travel to events in the Commonwealth.
All right. Thank you. Anyone else talk about what they're seeing? All right. Or questions for Kristen? Well, thank you. We will certainly keep following this. And don't know what else there is to say, but I know all of you have been watching the news also, and we'll pass along whatever we can regarding the budget. Well, I do have some good news on the Housing Trust Fund. We're not done yet. I keep hoping for that final vote, and it should be coming soon. But yesterday, the bill, we're looking at House Bill 792, came out of Senate Appropriations Committee. It is on the floor of the Senate, ready for final vote, and that is the final legislative step before it goes to the governor. I just saw the marked calendar. It's not going to happen today. I'm hoping next week. We do believe that it will happen, but this would be a great time to email, call, meet with your state senator. They'll be back in the district tomorrow and Friday, but you can certainly call the office anyway, Harrisburg or in the district. Let them know that they really need to get this done. Get it done this month, get it done next week, get it done as soon as they can. We're talking about, of course, funding. The other name for the Housing Trust Fund is FAIR. Those of you who are in shale counties know about FAIR, maybe have used some of the money. So we're looking at statewide funding so that all 67 counties can participate, and new revenue source that will be available across the state, including counties that are getting impact fee money. So we're really psyched, really optimistic about this. We've come a long way relatively quickly in legislative terms, and it's really because of all of the effort that you all have made in reaching out and making sure that this stays in front of your electeds, your reps and senators. And so I just ask you one more time to do that. Make the call and tell them that you would really like to see House Bill 792 passed next week, to please make sure their leadership schedules it for a vote. I have questions on the Housing Trust Fund. And Joyce, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, just similar excitement, keeping my fingers crossed.
Yeah. I know we've asked you to do a lot over the last year and a half that we've been on this campaign, but it's really paid off, so we appreciate that. Okay, well, the last thing I have on the agenda is some talk about some blight remediation efforts. I can tell you that there are two bills related to funding for demolition. One of them is demolition and rehab. I've mentioned in the past Senate Bill 486, Senator Argle's bill, to allow counties to establish a fund, with a demolition fund, with fees from recording deeds and mortgages. It passed the passed the Senate unanimously. It was scheduled for a committee vote in the House, but the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors raised some objections to doing recording fees on the deeds and mortgages, and so the bill is sitting, and we're busy looking for other funding sources. Haven't given up, and still hope to see that bill move at some point. Senator Brewster from Allegheny County has Senate Bill 482, which would establish a demolition and rehab fund by tacking on a fee to property sold through the tax sale process. And that bill just came out of the Senate Appropriations Committee, so it still needs a couple more steps in the Senate before it goes over to the House. I think it's a really good idea, something that we are working with Senator Brewster on. There are some questions about how it would work as a practical matter, and that's just a matter of reworking some of the language, but hopefully there's a little bit of momentum behind that. There are two identical bills that tweak a statute that's been around for a while, maybe 15 years, known as the Municipal Code and Ordinance Compliance Act. And what the Municipal Code and Ordinance Compliance Act does is it says that if somebody buys a property with known code violations on it, they have to fix it up within a specific period of time. If it's a building, within 18 months, and if it's a vacant lot, it has to be cleaned up within 12 months. And when it was passed, of course, it was envisioned that that would be a motivation to get people moving, that we're setting a time limit here. But in practice, what has happened, particularly in areas where you do have property maintenance codes and cities trying to enforce those codes in a much shorter time frame, they say, get this repair done in 3 months or get this repair done in 6 months. Some of the property owners are saying, no, wait a second, I've got 18 months. The two bills, and they're Senate Bill 942, House Bill 1437, change the 18 months to 12, but also say that it can be a shorter time where there is a property maintenance code that has a different time frame. The current law also says that the municipality may not deny any building permits just because they're code violations. So there's language added to the bills that says unless the municipality is operating under the permit denial provision of Act 90. So the House bill is still sitting in committee, but the Senate bill is working its way through the Senate. It did come out of the Urban Affairs Committee, had first and second consideration. You know, bills have to be heard on 3 separate days before each chamber. So there's still a few more steps, a couple more steps in the Senate, but that does seem to have some momentum. We have our clear title bill for people living in properties long-term, living in homes to which they don't have title. Often it started as a landlord-tenant situation, and the landlord disappears and dies. The tenant stays on, tries to maintain the place, but when the heater goes and she can't get a home improvement loan or grant because she doesn't have title, we end up with a displaced family with a vacant, abandoned property that nobody can deal with because the owner is out of the picture and it's got what we call clouded or tangled title. So this bill creates a time frame, a process for somebody who has been there for 10 years to claim title, and it's designed to stabilize communities, to keep families in place, and to prevent blight. It passed the House, as similar bills have done in previous sessions. It's sitting in the Senate Judiciary Committee. We're working on getting it moving, and one thing that would be very helpful is having other senators ask for it. If anybody knows of a situation that might be helped by this law, I would love to hear from, by this bill, I'd love to hear from you. And we do have stories from Philly and Pittsburgh. I'd especially like to have some stories from elsewhere in the state. So hopefully we'll be able to report on that moving soon. And the last thing I'll mention, I put on the agenda fast-track foreclosure for abandoned properties. This is not a bill yet, but it's an initiative. Several other states have sped up their foreclosure process, and this is bank foreclosure, not tax foreclosure, but bank foreclosure process where a property is vacant and abandoned so that it doesn't contribute to blight in the community. And, in fact, the banking associations and the community development corporations have come together, say in Illinois, to work this through. The Bankers Association in Pennsylvania have made a proposal, and the Housing Alliance, among others, are looking at it. A couple of differences between Pennsylvania and some of these other states that have done fast-track foreclosure. One is that Pennsylvania's process really isn't that long compared to some other states. The other is that what the other states have done is amend their foreclosure statute. We don't have a foreclosure statute. Our foreclosures, by and large, are governed by court rules, which can't be amended by the legislature. We do have a couple of statutes of laws on the books that deal with how much notice a homeowner gets and their ability to apply for the mortgage assistance program or their ability to pay bring the loan current. And then there are also mediation programs in many of the counties. And so, of course, those things don't make sense if the property is vacant. But so the Housing Alliance is taking the position that expediting the process for a vacant and abandoned property makes sense, but it's really important to make sure that the property is vacant, and that's one of the sticking points, vacant and abandoned, is how do we determine that, make sure that homeowners do get all of their due process considerations, and make sure that homeowners aren't sort of pushed out of their homes in order for the home to be declared vacant and abandoned. So we are negotiating all of that. I would love to be working with some of you who work with homeowners and foreclosure, maybe are a little more knowledgeable on the process than I am. So if you're interested in that, please give me a call or shoot me an email. I see we've reached 12 or just passed it, so I'm going to stop talking. Again, open the lines. Is there any question regarding the blight bills that I've just talked about? *7 to unmute your line. Well, we will keep you apprised. We will be talking to you the second Wednesday in November is the 11th. Before then, I hope it's long before then, you will be hearing from us about the Housing Trust Fund. And certainly as other things come along, we'll be letting you know. So thank you very much for getting on the call.
Thank you.
Talk to you next month.